Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Crew. I'm Don Zoldi, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other co-host. We've got some great guests with us today. We've got Erin Roesler and David Benowitz. We're gonna let them talk about themselves in a few seconds, but I'm gonna let you know we got some great stuff coming up on the episode. Uh, we're gonna be talking about Tesla's new robot. Is it cool? Is it not? We're going to be talking about the weaponization of robotics in general and how the community has made a statement against it and what does that mean. We're also going to be talking about Sony's new dementia detecting machine. And then finally, we're going to end up with some cool space stuff at the end. And there might even be a little bit of bonus content that David's provided to us. So please stay tuned for that. Before we get into the articles, though, we're going to start with our guests. I think we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Don, as well, for having me on the show. So I'm David Benowitz. I began my career in the drone space at DJI, where I kind of built up their enterprise marketing division. Since moved on to DroneAnalyst, which I've been running for the past 2 years. So you probably know us from our market share figures, forecasts, and all other kind of data we put out there on the market. And then recently joined the BRINC team as their director of marketing, doing a lot in the technology for public safety space, with a few new announcements coming out just a few weeks from now.
Awesome. And Erin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, gladly. So my name's Erin Roesler. I'm the Director of Operations at the Northern Plains UAS Test Site. So one of the 7 federal test sites, tasked with the very small challenge of integrating drones into the NAS, right? What's unique about, our test site is we also do have a state infrastructure initiative that's called Vantis. So not only are we, working at the federal level to integrate drones and work on policy and regulation, we're actually starting to build out shared infrastructure that supports BVLOS UAS operations. So supporting surveillance at C2, and that's what, the state of North Dakota has invested, just about $50 million to date on supporting that network. Like I said, it's called Vantis.
Awesome. And BVLOS is never not going to be the coolest thing on the planet for the drone industry. So thank you for supporting that monumental effort. So yeah, actually, and you brought us a really, really cool article. I'm going to pop it up right here. So tell us a little bit why you wanted to talk about Musk's new, or Tesla's new humanoid robot.
Right. Whether it's Musk developing this himself or, Tesla as the brand, the company. But I picked it because when I first got into UAS, which is, probably been about a decade now, I was always, we're always tackling it from the integration challenge. And I was one of the last people to get on the AI bus, to really respect what AI is and why it's important. And I have obviously now changed my mind, having seen the integration and seeing everything that drones and autonomy can do, any automation. The reality is the amounts of data that they put out is massive. And so unless we really solve the AI problem, we're not going to reap the benefits of automation, because we're always going to have humans on the back end still processing the terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. So why I'm excited about this, though, is, let's face it, if Elon gets an idea, he's going to take it and run with it. And so I think as Optimus, the robot here, also I think they were naming it Otto, he's going to put a lot of effort, a lot of financial support, and momentum behind solving the AI problem. I mean, this was a concept last year, so from a year last year when they announced this at AI Day, to this year, we now see a walking humanoid, right? And then the next step, he wants this to be fully commercialized product in 3 to 5 years, which is record-breaking pace. But I think the greater impact is the parallel benefits that we'll see from this. The algorithms, the technology that is going into Optimus, that's great, it's really cool, but it's going to be able to be leveraged in the self-driving automation space. It's going to be able to be leveraged in the UAS and the drone space, in the space era, right? That's what gets me excited about this article. I don't think I'm going to buy a robot anytime soon. I have a couple of Roombas. That's maybe about the bit of it. But what gets me excited is, the fast pace that Elon Musk and the Tesla Corporation companies put behind development of technologies. And so seeing them in this space gets me excited for the benefits it will bring to the parallel industries.
What's your thoughts, David? I mean, you worked at a giant robotics firm, and you work at a plucky one now. Turnaround time, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that they're showing the product well before it's actually, ready to be shown or ready to market, which is kind of very much the Elon style. Even with his cars, they're kind of shown very well in advance. This is even well beyond kind of what he's done in the past. I'll kind of say from a product perspective and then from a marketing perspective. From a product perspective, like, it's certainly impressive how fast they've been able to move, prop something up, and get things moving. And it's super interesting to see kind of the parallels with Boston Dynamics and how they've been heads down in trying to perfect a product and then kind of introduce it to market very slowly with Spot and really define the market fit before they kind of scale it out and lower prices and whatnot, which they're not even there yet with their first product. But, we've seen their robots are clearly years ahead of anything Tesla's actually doing. But we're going to see in the long run what's really the approach to market that makes sense. Is it this slow and methodical engineering approach, or is it kind of the fast and heavy, see what we can get on the market? I'm assuming they're also going to try to get prices kind of low at that initial stage too, and just get the units out there. And so we're going to see those two very different approaches in go-to-market, which is exciting because if you asked me a year ago who was kind of leading in like humanoid form robots that could be used for very broad tasks, I would only say BD. And now it's like, well, now they have somebody, behind them, but at least nipping at their heels and has a potential to have some real competition and maybe force them to go to market earlier. From the marketing side, it's always fun to think about everything Elon does is just like a PR move and everything he says. And
I don't think he knows any other way to be anymore, right?
Exactly. And they don't have a marketing strategy, they have a PR strategy, and he's great at it. And we've certainly seen his kind of stock and his value decrease with the whole Twitter drama, a lot of the statements he makes throughout Russia and China and whatnot, their big investment in China as well. And so this might also be a way just to kind of refocus attention, not on him, but on kind of like, people buying Tesla originally because they were the future of everything. They were saving the world. And we've kind of forgotten that for the past year or two. And now this is trying to, I think, get back to that kind of main line of things. And, even if it is more than ready, get people excited about it, get people talking about it. Kind of like what Amazon did with their package delivery stuff, right? Like, it's still not here today, but I'm sure if they didn't mention it at the time that they did, we'd be a little bit further back, well, even further back in regulations than we are now. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on both those sides. Do you guys kind of agree, or what do you guys think?
Well, I would love to jump in here because, reading this whole article, the one thing that jumped out at me actually was a tweet, David, that he sent after this, which was like, oh, don't worry, we're going to create our Catwoman version of this. And I was just like, really? But like, it's so Elon. And I don't know if you guys are tracking, but I also read, so there's, I guess, been some allegations of sexual harassment, in Tesla. And then this, I don't know if you guys knew, fun fact for those that didn't know, all of those EVs that he's created, they carried an acronym SEXY. The S.
But
right?
that was known at the time. That was part of the marketing, Don.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
but
in fact, it was just sex at first, and the Model 3 is literally
the E
reverse.
It's the backwards E. Yeah. So,
but that's when people thought he was cool because he was doing trolley-like things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's
yeah. I've got a Tesla. I love my car. He does great things. He just says weird stuff, and I'm not to the point of like just walking away with my dollars and never buying another Tesla, but I don't know. So I'm a little concerned about maybe the culture that's going on there at Tesla from some of the things I'm hearing. But yeah, if they can go from dancing around in leotards on a stage in the last year to actually having this robot walking across the stage this year, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, my favorite part was the background. It was so trippy. They're trying to really create the ambiance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Don,
did you
totally
say, Erin?
agree with you. Oh, I was gonna say, just totally agree with you on the concerns on Tesla as a company and those accusations. Definitely, that's where I personally always feel really torn on it, because like you said, you're like, not to the point of pulling your dollars and not buying a Tesla. However, man, like, clean up that part a little bit, try.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still, at the end of the day, whether it be BD, whether it be Tesla and the work that they're doing in the AI space, I look at one of the big challenges that we have in society right now is workforce, right? And
Yeah.
autonomy and automation is really a workforce multiplier. So if we can solve this AI issue, we're going to be helping solve the workforce issue. And I think that for me is, why I got excited behind this article as well. Again, not just the whole Elon thing and making the future more awesome or whatever the Tesla mission statement is, but something along those lines. I think he probably will be getting there, or contributing towards making it more awesome.
No, I think the workforce thing is something everyone always forgets, right? And from an OEM perspective, when we've covered this topic in the past, like, obviously a lot of this technology, drones, these robots, and anything else is really designed to minimize the amount of jobs needed to perform tasks. But so few companies actually say that publicly because
Yes.
essentially they are afraid of the stigma of replacing jobs and whatnot. But the fact is we're going to have labor issues. We're going to have population issues. That's just the economics of it. And so this is what kind of gets us there and us doing, better, more important tasks than what we've done in previous generations.
Yeah, Don will corroborate, but I've kind of been bringing this up consistently, that this kind of needs to stop being the messaging that we're just going to make work easier. No, we're going to replace work, and some of that work shouldn't have to be done by humans. That's the truth of it, but, we as a society need to actually start planning against that, whether it's with social support programs or that these companies actually create paths. I don't expect the companies to. It's not really within their economic incentives, but there might be a clever person out there that uses it as a PR win to figure out a way to marry those two. But outside of that, I think this is really kind of a societal thing that we need to start thinking about. So, what's interesting, you were talking about, David, how it seems like Elon might be trying to return the focus more to hey, remember when Tesla was cool and just the tech future? I think a lot of Silicon Valley, especially the FANG category and the tier right below that, have been failing at that. And I don't think people are buying the message like they used to, because they're living in their techno future and they're seeing some nightmare results on things that were kind of obvious at the outset. But that being said, this robot is actually cooler than I think people might assess. So Ramon from Drone Code sent this to me actually when the announcement was first made. This guy, Christian Hubicki, he's a robotics researcher. So is he totally blown away with this thing? No. But is he laughing? No also. Apparently it uses 0 moment points, which is different than the Boston Dynamics robots. So it is not only a competitor or a potential competitor, a firm that has known engineering chops, but it's working on a completely different mechanism. So that's a great technology race story, right? Which one of these specific technologies will actually prove to be more useful for whoever the consumer or client is that purchases it? And yeah, I really do love the stereo chest plate. That's a real Elon kind of flair, right? So when people did think he was cool, that was the type of thing he was known for. I will say though, I stopped thinking he was cool when he called the guy a pedophile who rescued the children. That was kind of like the maybe we should at least take this man's ability to lead teams separately from his public persona. And in terms of the team stuff being in question, yeah, I mean, it's funny, the stuff that I hear in the press about him has not been corroborated by people I know, but there's other weirder, even more upsetting stuff that I have heard from people inside Tesla. So, is it the next Uber in terms of internal controversy? I hope not, because they do really make some good stuff, and that if they do have issues, they will be able to kind of correct course. So Awesome article. Thank you, Erin, for bringing that up. We really did the world tour on that issue. I think actually the next one is going to be no less hot button. So,
well,
Dave...
and a great segue, Mike, because we were just talking about Boston Dynamics, and it so happened that David picked this article.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I guess also as a segue, I'll also talk about maybe the bigger race is between Hyundai, who owns Boston Dynamics and is kind of second in the row in the EV race, is the true competitor for Tesla. And so this article, which I'll kind of do an intro then, is a consortium of essentially RoboDog and other robot manufacturers, led primarily by Boston Dynamics, have kind of signed a letter stating that they're not going to weaponize their products. And I find this exciting for two ways. Like, one is just like, that's great to see kind of that leadership coming from these manufacturers. But also the second side, which is from an OEM who, in the past has, seen their products weaponized, and then currently where we're kind of working around that, which is deploying drones, deploying products that kind of reduce the use of force for police. There's a lot more that goes into just signing a letter and saying you're not going to do it. There's a lot of policing that comes down to in the channel, into how the sales actually work. Are you doing know your customer rules and all this stuff? Where we have seen several robots on that list of companies already with guns strapped to the back of their products in other countries, likely not due to the manufacturer, but just because of that as well. So this is always the gray line that I think all these companies are trying to figure out, which is, yes, publicly Boston Dynamics or these other companies are not going to weaponize their products, but what are they actually doing to actively prevent that? Or, just you've seen photos of like a Spot carrying ammo for a soldier. Does that count as weaponization as well? So these are the gray areas that they really need to answer if they want to follow their ethics. That's much more than just signing a letter. But I think this is the start to a much longer conversation that the whole public is going to have, the whole audience is going to have out there as well. And, what exactly does this count as? And, there's a few companies, especially Unitree on that list, that has already been pretty bad at monitoring who actually gets their products and how they weaponize them. And so, my hot take is that 5 years from now, Boston Dynamics is going to look at this and regretting it, either because they've been pushed to weaponize or because people on this list have, not been policing as well as they have.
Well, Erin, what's your take? I know Dawn probably has a great.
I've got a ton of thoughts, so I'm going to let Erin go first.
Yeah, so you definitely get yours out of the way.
Well, I mean, you kind of hit on it a little bit there. When reading this article, it's a great letter, but I really question the meat behind it. What are they going to do once the product is sold and off their shelves, to prevent the drone or the robot from being weaponized? But the other aspect of it is what is weaponization in this era? The picture shows a gun on the robot, but technology and information is equally vital and critical in security and safety. So if these are equipped with cameras or spectrum, sniffers or things like that, then can start mapping out, repeated life cycles or other elements that
ISR stuff.
Grabbing information that's equally vital to someone's safety and security. What is weaponization anymore, right? And so that's the element that I'm like, it's a great letter, but I really again question their ability to follow through and prevent them from actually being weaponized in the traditional sense, as well as then what about the future of weapons and that information security aspects, because these drones and these robots can be utilized for that equally as well.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a contrarian position here and say, what's the big deal, honestly? Like, okay, so there's really positive uses, if you will, for weaponizing a robot, whether it's that Tesla Optimus we just saw, or this dog, in warfare, if it could save lives but achieve the ends. I mean, we do this all the time with technology, right? So again, is the human in the loop? Is the human on the loop? Is this completely autonomous? Who's making the decisions? If I can send a robot in just now, right, more routinely, they're sending robots to like essentially sniff out mines, right? For mine review, for humanitarian purposes, that's a beautiful use of a robot. you know, but if I can send a wave of robots in with guns that can fight a war and I don't have to have a whole generation of men and women killed, okay. I mean, it just depends on what the use, you know, why they're doing it. What's the intent? Is it in accordance with the law of war, this operation and this weapon? You know, all of these things, at least in warfare, right? So to me, like, it's a legitimate use if it's in accordance with the law of war. Now, where you would be concerned, of course, you're going to always have the criminals, the clueless, the careless, like who gets their hands on these things and what are they using them for? Criminals using them to commit crimes, right? I could see a really great use case. I don't know if you guys remember a couple years ago, there was this crazy guy. I forget. I don't know. It was like Arkansas. Some guy like went on a bus, grabbed a couple kids, took at least one boy in a cave or something. Do you guys remember this? And then the FBI, I think, used a drone at some point. To have a dog like this, you know, that has the ability, if necessary, to use some kind of kinetic force to take that guy out and save that kid in a cave, right? GPS denied, where I don't have to send in my SWAT team. Yay. I mean, like, I'm all for that. So I don't know. I just feel it was just a little bit of a little bit naive to say, well, and I also think you're cutting off a whole, like, David, you're the market guy. You cut off a whole market and you're going to tell the military, like, you can use our dogs just for ISR, but not for all the other possible purposes that they can, for, you know, good reason be used for. Then why would I buy from you? I'm going to Ghost Robotics, who didn't sign this letter. So I understand the concern because you're seeing some maybe nefarious uses of these things. Rex Alexander from 5 Alpha just sent me, ironically, just the other day, a video of a Chinese drone dropping one of these dogs and some statement like, we will drop them in behind, you know, lines of soldiers and surprise them and kill them all or something like that. Yeah. It's just like, oh, okay, I mean, if we're in a real conflict and that's in the law of war, then okay, you got me. But, you know, it's scary, but, you know, weapons keep progressing and that's just reality. So I just say do it in accordance with international customs and laws, and then why not?
Well,
but
I think the concern, Don, for this technology is actually the affordability. So I guess the closest analogy would be like pocket nukes, like that I could think of, right? So concern after the fall of the Soviet Union, yes, that actor at the time, we would have expected them, even with the Cold War going on, to operate within, you know, I guess, the law of war, right? But after that falls, and we're not sure what the political stability situation is, now this technology can be proliferated and used by more bad actors who are unconcerned with all the nuances of that. And you can very easily imagine, since these are easy enough to produce, a situation where these could, because there's no risk to the robot, control populations, and they don't even have a fair chance. So in terms of just researchers not wanting their stuff to be used to murder people, that's really, I think, as simply as where this comes from. I mean, you might be able to call that naive, but you can say that if I'm committing to building a piece of technology and I don't want it to be used a certain way, why should I have to allow it just because the market will eventually produce this thing anyway? Well, then let the market produce it and let another person build it. I would assume that's what the researchers that sign this are really kind of saying.
Well, actually, maybe, but I think to David's point, I think policing this is going to be hard. In other words, like, what you're going to have a whole
crack. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're going to have a whole branch of your company is going to do, what's your due diligence look like? And then what kind of liability concerns does that raise? If you say you're going to do something, this is where duty comes from in negligence. If you say you are going to do something as a company and somehow you fall short of that, someone uses your product then in a way that you said you're going to protect people from, I don't know. It really raises a whole bunch of weird legal issues, I think, too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
so
I'm,
let's.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I
Oh,
was just going to bring up that I know
yeah.
one of the people that signed this. So this is Catherine Scott. She works at Open Robotics. She's a developer advocate. Pretty upfront with her opinions on things too. So, like for example, her LinkedIn profile says I loathe LinkedIn right on the front of it. So they spent a lot of time on putting this statement together. But I will say some people had immediate pushback because there's two sides. Like, okay, now what are you doing? So you've made the statement. What are you doing to actually curb this? And then she responded to that. I commend you to take a look at her tweets. But then also, like you said, if somebody else is going to do it, why even bother? I think those two, yeah, I just want to see what their next steps are and what these companies actually do commit to. What were you going to say, David?
Well, yeah, I was just going to take let's take a very nuanced look at DJI and Unitree, who's on this list of companies, because this is how the model is going to work for these Chinese companies that are going to do the same thing, cheaper cost, maybe worse software, right? So DJI started out with cheap hardware that was pretty configurable, like the M100 back in 2017. You could buy it for $2,000, mount whatever you want on it. It's a bomb, it's a gun. You can literally do whatever you want with it, and then that's what was ISIS was using and deploying on a daily basis. There was no policing on the sales. You could buy it through e-commerce, ship to wherever you want. Okay, then just forward ship it. Maybe it doesn't ship to Iraq or whatnot, but you forward ship to Germany, and then it you just pass it along like that. Unitree robots are available on e-commerce platforms all over the world. No one buys them. They're a little bit expensive. They're like $4,000 or something. But you can order it online today. It'll just take a while to ship because they're shipping from China and they're big units. And you can do whatever you want with it. That's the question. Yes, they signed the letter. Are they going to stop that? I highly doubt it. And so that's the thing, right? Where it's this type of thing where everyone in the market signs this means the lowest bidder and the person who's going to police the least is going to gain the most benefit from this type of rule, because everyone in all these countries that need to weaponize for cheap cost are going to do it from that type of supplier. So that's also what we've seen in Ukraine, is both sides buying a lot of different Chinese drones because they're readily available, forward shipping. No one's really checking who's buying them. And there's even ITAR restrictions on some U.S. made products that aren't ITAR restricted or similarly export controlled on the China side. And so this is really going to be kind of an open space for this market. But to go back to Don's point, there's nothing wrong ethically with being, someone who's supplying and weaponizing people to save lives, right? That's the ultimate goal for all robotics, is that we can identify good and bad, and we're actually separating ourselves from making that decision. Because a lot of casualties and that happen in police or that happen on the front lines of war are often because, people are scared for their own lives, so they make a very quick decision with bad information. And so actually, the more we minimize
or make
that,
no decision, they freeze up, right? Because
exactly.
their natural instinct to protect themselves comes in, right?
Yeah. Or it's okay if the robot dies. That's totally fine if it gets shot out first. At least we know we've made a distinction between good and bad, that we can take another step to kind of remedy the situation. And so ultimately, they will save lives as well. But a lot of these companies, they can't hire engineers if they're doing weaponized technology. It's harder because a lot of engineers lean a certain direction and their beliefs on this. And then they also want to capture the commercial market. And there's always kind of a weird distinction between it becoming a commercial company and a military company. And they also want to bleed that line of things as well. So we'll see where it goes. Boston Dynamics started, I think, with their roots in the military space, right?
Yeah. It's called dual use, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah. Huge reversal from then. So we'll see exactly where this goes. But, certainly needs a lot more policing. I would love to eventually have even regulations from the government on how, if you want to be a commercial company with this type of, dual use product, how do you have to police it through the channel? How do you have to police it through sales? Because realistically, we all need to do better. And I think what happened with DJI and the drone space is just despicable. It's something I personally reflect on. I think it's just wrong.
Can I just say one more thing? And I want Erin, and then we should go to our next article. A number of states, when they were popping up all of these drone laws in the 2013 to 2015 timeframe, did put in specific prohibitions on weaponizing drones, specifically. So I think there is, David, to your point, I think there is a role for legislators, at the state level, federal level, maybe even, to put in some of these bans that if you do it in a way, right, that is not authorized, because I think there should be authorized ways to do it, then it's a crime. And I think that will help detract. And then it takes it off, the companies having to put out these moral statements and policing themselves. Like, so much easier if it's like, hey, there's a rule. Like, I can't violate that rule, and makes it a little easier.
Yeah, no, that's a theme we hear time and time again now, Don. Like, yeah, this kind of narrative that, like, oh, you don't want to regulate technology too soon because then it'll kill innovation. Yeah, that's true. But a lot of these technologies are developed enough that we could start making, some calls on things. Because otherwise we're just, allowing ourselves to, to live in a world of random chance where this technology can be very, very dangerous.
No, Don, I mean, have you been reading North Dakota Century Code? Is that what you've been
No, I read all of them at some point, Erin, but not recently.
I can't remember if it was last biennium, so North Dakota is on a biennium, either last biennium or the one previously. We actually had a code that was added. It got pretty controversial because the terminology was actually adding that you can't add non-lethal weapons. Lethal weapons were already prohibited on aircraft and drones and robots, but we added on non-lethal as well. So that was the aspect, and it was a little scrutinized because people just didn't understand what was currently on code and what got added in. So to your point is, yeah, the state of North Dakota does have that law in the books now that, so even these companies that, if they did choose to weaponize, they're not available legally in the state of North Dakota unless they are for the appropriate means, as we've talked about, for law enforcement, for military applications, for the applications in which they should be permitted.
Just one last thing to leave the audience with. I don't think there's a sure answer to it, but let's just think about the organizations that sign this and think about what their incentives are to be perceived a certain way in the world. So if you're, an open source foundation, you might want to attract people that are from both sides of the aisle, and the peaceniks won't want to join in, right? Whereas if you're Boston Dynamics, there might be a commercial incentive that they are calculating that they can't sell to both, and one is actually worth more money than the other. And in terms that's ultimately their decision to sign it, but they're making the statement, and like we said, nothing's going to stop the market because there is a need for weaponized robots. Nothing's going to stop the market from producing those, even if this statement is made. So lots of controversy today. I love it, though. These are great conversations. That's what it's all about. We just want to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We've got Aiken Gump, Dragonfly, Promo Drone, and L-Site. They've been sponsoring this podcast since, for weeks now. Thank you so much for all that they do in the space and allowing us to continue. We also want to thank the audience. Remind you guys to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and like this video. We've grown quite a bit since we started. We're only about 3 months old, and we're growing 130% month over month. So the support really does matter. Next up, we've got, actually, I think this is a really heartwarming one. This will be a nice little kind of transition. So tell us about what Sony's doing, Don.
Yeah, this is a weirdie, right? So Sony Corporation has created a device that measures a person's sense of smell. People put their noses in this thing, in the holes, and there's 40 different odors that this emits. Now, there's apparently, and they didn't go deep into the science of this, and frankly, I didn't have to do my own scientific research on it, but there is a nexus between your ability to smell and dementia. And that in and of itself I found interesting. The fact that this machine can emit these odors. It almost has like a little sanitizing thing between odors so you don't confuse odors. Like, very, very complex thing, because the alternative and the way they used to test this is basically almost like if you're at the perfume counter at the strip mall, right, or at Macy's, they spray it on a little piece of paper, and had the person smell it. But with all the particles in the air, those scents would get confused. It was very inact, I'll call it science, the way they would do it before this particular machine. And there's like 5 types of odors that it emits: flower, fruit, and something rotting, right? And all different kind of strengths. Again, a total of 40 different ones. It's airtight. It costs about $16,000, but really kind of interesting. So just the weirdness of it attracted me to it. The fact that it could, now what you do with this information if they determine there's some olfactory deficit and therefore you may be kind of on the road to dementia. I don't know how they break that to people. I don't know what the counseling is. I don't know what the kind of modalities are for treatment after that. I don't know, but this is more diagnostic almost, it sounds like. The other thing I'll say, and then I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts on this. I didn't realize there was this connection between smell and dementia, and that really got me thinking, holy shnikes, with COVID, all these people losing their sense of smell and taste both. I mean, 2 of your 5 senses, that in itself was a big deal. But that concerns me because we don't know the long-term effects of COVID. And if there really is this link between your sense of smell, like I actually have a friend who never got her sense of smell or taste back.
Yeah,
like
my great aunt still doesn't have it back.
To this day.
Yeah.
And I can't, right? So what is the long-term effect on that? Is that going to be concerning? I don't know, but it just raised a whole bunch of questions for me. So I'd love to hear Erin's thoughts.
Yeah, well, where to start? We'll start in the article, right? So the article and, the impacts it could have for not only the individuals that, will potentially be suffering from dementia, but the family members as well. Because I think that's the bigger impact when you talk about dementia or even as it progresses into Alzheimer's, is the family support. And, looking at my grandfather suffered from Alzheimer's towards the end of his life and actually had a number of years where it was probably about 5 years where you would have the same conversations with him. I feel blessed because for him, things were just frozen in time. I was always in his mind a high school senior, even after I'd gone to college and whatnot. But, looking at this technology and looking at what that could have done for our family in that setting, if we had, had the indication a little earlier, what could we have done to either help with treatments or help with, because there are some medications out there for dementia and Alzheimer's. Could we have started those sooner? Could it have, curbed the effects of it longer? Because it wasn't Alzheimer's that was, for him, his cause of death. It was some, other factors. Ended up being lung cancer. He liked his cigarettes. So, but besides that part, the impacts that could have the family setting and planning for those life events, that would be huge. But the COVID side, yeah, the sense of smell. So my doctor, my OB, she had COVID pretty early on, and she's 3 years now since does not have her sense of smell back. And having had COVID myself, when I was actually pregnant at the time, there's all that risk factor. I had a lot of complications that, came up about from that. But, as society, we're all now looking forward, like what happens in 5 years, 10 years, as we're all coming out of this. And yeah, the aspect on how vital your smell is, prior to 2020, anyone would have guessed this? I wouldn't have. Other than some smelling if my wine is good or bad, right? But that's it. So I think it is fascinating what we're discovering on the medical science side of this.
What are your thoughts, David?
For sure. That's a rough time to be pregnant. But congrats on the baby, and good that everything went well. I mean, yeah, I had another family member who was pregnant during that time, and it was stressful. But yeah, no, I agree. I think like overall we're seeing a lot of investment in medical technologies, and that's really what's going to push us forward. And this is a great example of that. And I would love for the U.S. ecosystem to be more focused on great hardware, great medical tech instead of all this SaaS and social media stuff. And we have an ecosystem in Japan where Sony's based out of, and also Korea and China where they are more focused on hardware. And I'd love to see that shift in the U.S., which is happening on the regulatory side. It's getting there, and it'll probably take a few decades. But this is what's going to really drive the next steps of humanity, robots and medical tech, that kind of take us to the next level. So yeah, the more it happens, the more lives we can kind of extend and keep people functioning and healthy longer. And dementia has such negative impacts on obviously everything, the family and whatnot. And so this is just a great example of that, and where I hope more investment in tech goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to see a piece of tech that can be used within HIPAA compliance easily. Yeah, because so much, especially you brought up in the U.S., a lot of it SaaS-based innovation, which is becoming like less and less. I mean, it's so commoditized now. It's not a differentiator. You even saw kind of like there was like a second kind of revolutionary cycle around logistics-based SaaS. That would be like Uber and Airbnb. But like we really need to start thinking in terms of hardware integration. How do we take something like a machine learning algorithm and, give it to an eye doctor or a doctor here in this scenario who's trying to detect, mental illness. Yeah, I think this is wins all around on this one. It's less controversial than everything else we've been talking about. And actually, I hope that we get back to this kind of tech just more. This feels good, it's less debatable.
Yeah. Well, and it just, when you think about tech and robots and all the things we're focused on here, this is a perfect example of efficiency, right? So I mentioned that kind of manual testing that they used to do. What I failed to say is that, it used to take at least 30 minutes to do it, and it's now like 1/3 of the time. So that's like 3 times. I'm doing public math, something I said I would never do and I'm not very good at. That's like 3 times the amount of people you could test in a given time frame, right? And like give care to. So, and maybe 3 times fewer people that you have to have monitor. You know what I mean? Like just giving them their time back, the techs, the medical techs that have to oversee this. If they're not going to be testing the 3 times the amount of people, they got now 2/3 the time amount of time back that they can be doing other things to help people. So that's just, I think, another win and another aspect of this that I failed to mention. I think is really important.
Yeah, workforce multiplier.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, we're going to be kind of rapidly moving on just because we're running up on times, and I want to get to David's post. So my article today is, after successful first launch, Firefly sets sight on the national security market. I actually came to this because I was trying to find, no joke, an Elon Musk thing where I heard he was trying to also get such a bid, but this one seemed like it was already awarded. So both Firefly was awarded by the U.S. Space Force a $17.6 million contract in 2023, specifically for kind of a rapid deployment of a low Earth orbit satellite. So I think we're finally seeing what Space Force is all about in the real world. If I could say one thing, without talking about the previous administration's general kind of tactics, I feel like they kind of botched this announcement where Space Force became so defined about, the Star Trek logo and the uniform, rather than what is the need for actually propping up a completely new military institution when a lot of its perceived purview would have been already under NASA and the Air Force. And here is the answer, right? Here is the literal answer. So I wanted to bring this up because I know Dawn has a lot of background in research in this, and she's been kind of educating me on what the whole deal with Space Force is. So Dawn, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this article too.
Well, first thing I want to say is, fun fact, I actually met Stephen McCall when I was at the Move America conference. Stephen is the Director of Government Relations and Regulatory, at Firefly. And met him at a dinner during this. It was in Austin, Texas. And they were just getting ready for this launch. So really big deal to be able to rapidly deploy, and that's the goal of this program that Firefly is involved in, to rapidly deploy satellites, other assets into space. So that's kind of the whole purpose of this. They did win that contract. They're working with NASA, and they're gunning for working with Northrop Grumman in the future to do kind of a next phase, if you will, where they will be going circling full. You know, the show always has these connections. It's crazy. They're going head to head with Tesla.
Yes.
On
well,
right.
That's how I found the article. I had seen like
Yeah,
a tweet
because you're
about
googling Tesla.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this came up. So yeah, I got to see how deep this actually goes. That this isn't just like Tesla came up with the idea, which is what most people might think, right?
Yeah, so it's something we don't talk about enough, space, but man, everything, so much of the technology we talk about every single day, and even that we talked about today, is so reliant on space, even if it's just on, you know, GNSS satellites, right? The position, navigation, timing satellites that are out there. So yeah, so they're really cutting their teeth here in the national security market, and I think it's really cool. So I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts.
What's your thoughts, Erin?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, when Space Force first was announced, I failed to see the purpose, and it was so challenging about that is it was such a presence here in North Dakota, surprisingly, right? But with the University of North Dakota and the work they do in aerospace, space was just this natural extension. In fact, President of the university, Andy Armacost, was actually the first university to sign on to the Space Force University Partnership Program. And, you know, it made headlines towards end of last year on how we're bringing Space Force to the university and integrating it into the undergraduate programs and creating this great partnership. And I still sat there and I'm like, I don't get it. So reading this article, it's for me now finally solidifying, like we said, the need and what the vision and the purpose of Space Force really will do for us as a country. And I think now I'm like, okay, now I get it. Maybe I'm just a little late to the game here, but it makes a lot of sense, all the efforts that are going behind the movement.
What are your
we
thoughts?
Always had, yeah, I want to get David here too, but just real quick, just having been in the Air Force for 25 years. I mean, we had a space component. Like, it was always air and space. Like, it wasn't in the title, but it was always the Air and Space Force. And, you know, so just making it formal the way it was like very politicized too, frankly. You know, a lot of jokes, like Mike said, about the, you know, what should the uniform be and things like that. And I guess a lot of joking now about their, what would you call it, David? Not their theme song. You know, every military has like a fight song.
Yeah.
They're, you know, and like it literally sounds like Mighty Mouse. You know,
Yeah.
here I come to save
Space
the
Force
day.
can't win. I don't know who's doing the branding, but they should lead with the innovation and not worry
so
about the silly stuff.
hugely important. All the gaffes aside, David,
Yeah.
you go please.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think all the politicians got involved in the branding, and that's what caused a lot of issues.
Yeah. They got too excited, right?
Probably.
Way too excited. But no, it's a great thing. I mean, like that's the area where we're really winning in, and where America's leading the world, and it's great to have an organization that's overseeing a lot of that, even if it's on the civilian side too, because so much of what happens in space needs to be coordinated, and if it's not, we may just lose access to a lot of ways that we could deploy in space, and not just for military purposes, but for like communication purposes and whatnot. So it'd be great to get more coverage and whatnot. You know, even just from my work in kind of the public safety space, you can already see a lot of limitations to our existing telecom networks that are, you know, based on things that need to be installed on planet Earth. So you ever ask a firefighter or a policeman about like all the different telecom carriers and their specific public safety networks, they'll just complain your ear off about how they don't actually work where they need them to work. And satellites eventually make the most sense. So I'm excited to eventually get a lot more coverage, a lot more access to technology, communications, internet connection to a lot of these different areas where we really need them crucially, and there's a big need as well. Like we, at BRINC, we deploy a lot of like cellular power two-way communications devices for de-escalation communication for drones as well, and that's going to become really key to unlocking that, and eventually having Space Force organizing a lot of those launches, even if they're not military but civilian, is going to be helpful to all of us and getting them out there at a scale and cost that we really need them to be.
And as an attorney, I mean, this is a really interesting area, almost like the cyber area, especially when it comes to the military side of things. Like what is an act of war in space? There's just so many so there's a group that's out there nugging away at what the law of war should be in space, right? Just like they did the Talon manual, they called it, in cyber. So this is a really kind of ripe area for exploration, not just on the military and commercial side, but from the legal side and policy side. Just so many things that are dependent on it. It's really critical we get it right.
Yeah, and hopefully as more stories like this, because now we're a couple years into the kind of official instantiation of this branch of the military, that the kind of public perception will change. One of the things that I thought was truly silly about the show with Steve Carell on Netflix was they made it seem like the Chinese version of Space Force was like super advanced. And to David's point, this is actually one of the areas the U.S. is in the lead. So, yeah, I hope to see more of this. And, I hope there's a lot of private companies that bid and compete to make even better stuff, right? That's the kind of whole point of these initiatives. So speaking of David, we've got one last thing from him he wanted to bring up. This is for our drone people out there. He is still the drone analyst. So what were you bringing up to talk about?
Yeah, well, this just popped up right before we started recording, and I thought it was kind of cool news to kind of bring the interesting information about the drone space, and also kind of reflects larger trends, which is that Drone Deploy just acquired Instruction Site, and we're actually waiting for the official press release. They just did like the live announcement, but so we don't have like the news part of this yet. But if you're listening now, you can just Google, and there's gonna be a little bit more information than what I share here. But essentially, Instruction Site has been for getting 3D data, point cloud data from inside a building. Drone Deploy has kind of always been leading on the photogrammetry side for drones, which is the exterior side. And they also bought a robotics company to start automating some of the interior stuff. And so this is a really logical segue for a drone company that offers a solution to slowly start integrating and do more of the full stack for an industry. And this is the trend that I think we're going to see across all the different industries and sectors, right? Company BRINC that I'm working with is now also doing the same, kind of moving from drones to other like handheld throw phone type devices in public safety. And we're going to start to see that same trend in every industry, which is drones are just kind of the first start to like an autonomous future for all these different segments and all these different industries. And the more that companies realize that, hey, look, I'm not just a drone solution provider, I am a utilities or a public safety or a construction or et cetera type of service provider, they'll realize their technology has a lot more applications across the full stack of work and automating it from A to Z.
Yeah, one thing about the drone industry is it forces you to think about autonomy, right? Truly letting go of the wheel. And yeah, and to your point, the drone industry itself, though, is so small, it can't actually even provide its true value proposition until it starts integrating with other hardware and software systems. And
yeah, I mean, I'm sure Erin is walking the talk here up there in North Dakota with Vantis. I mean, the buzzword is collaboration. I mean, if you're not reaching across the aisle, if you're not working with that company that you might have initially thought was a competitor, you're missing out, because there's definitely ways you can synergize. And I think Vantis and Grand Sky, of course, which is separate from Vantis, great examples of that kind of collaboration that we're seeing, bringing those companies together.
Yeah, I mean, it's Midwest nice or whatever it is, but that is a benefit that we've always had here in North Dakota of, being able to share and, work the UAS industry forward together. But I am excited about this collaboration and this acquisition as well, because looping way back to my first article, why did I say, I liked that article was, well, I've always been on the integration side, and that's been the challenge, but starting to see more and more the data analytics and, you know, the processing, and as you talked about, the stacked approach to all these things, that's equally important. And I was late to come to the game and vote on, or, you know, voice my opinion and say we need that stuff too, but it's definitely great to see that moving forward.
Well, and I think to tie that together, like, it would be great to look at Erin and what's happening in North Dakota with Vantis in 5 years from now. What I bet you'll see, and what I bet you're probably already starting to see signs of, is as drones get more adoption from the infrastructure you're building now, it probably trickles into other forms of autonomy, not because you built infrastructure for them, but just because the drones build infrastructure for those other forms of autonomy. And so it's great to see that, like, first mover on kind of the government side and what's happening there. But it would be great to see, like, 5 years down the road where it's going, where it'll be.
Keep watching our headlines. It's not going to take that long.
Yeah.
All right. Woo,
All right.
You go, Erin.
So that's a great segue to end the show. Thank you to our guests for providing some amazing articles today, ripe with controversy and amazing facts too. I don't think you'll get better insights anywhere else. So thank you to them for joining us today. Thank you to the audience. Just so you know, this was a pre-tape show. I am currently in Japan, so some things will actually develop by the time you're seeing this. Please look into the articles. I'm sure a lot of cool news has happened since then. And also thank you to my co-host, Dawn. As always, we can't tell you what's coming up next week, but Dawn, any other last words to leave the audience with?
No, actually, Mike, I looked ahead, my friend, and
right.
I can tell you kind of what's coming up
Future
real
sight.
quick. I did. So on October 25th, Tuesday, we're not going to do our normal Twitter Spaces because Mike will be in Japan. It will be midnight there, so we're going to have mercy on him. But Wednesday on the Dawn of Drones, we are going to have Liz Osborne from Anna Moment. It's Industry Enablers Month, and this is a family-owned Colorado business that takes small swap sonic anemometers. These provide mission-critical atmospheric monitoring. So really interesting stuff. And then Thursday on Clubhouse, we actually have Mission Go. We'll be kicking off Global Industry Leaders Month. So yeah, that's our lineup for this particular week.
All right, sounds awesome, and I'm sure there's more awesome stuff in addition to that you could expect from the crew. Just a reminder, if you liked what you heard, hit that like button, subscribe, notification bell, helps the channel grow. You could also go to fullcrew.io and sign up for our newsletter. You'll never miss a live stream. That's all we send to you in your mailbox. Little notification, let you know we're about to go live. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we are out here.
Yeah.